East End Writers 20th anniversary, of course, in the 21st year. I'm Sharon Crawford. I started this group in September 2000 because I had just moved back from Aurora a couple of years before that. And I wanted to join a group with a format very similar to the Richville Writers in Richmond Hill. And I couldn't find one. So if you can't find something, you set one up yourself, which I did do. And we started meeting in my living room. I was worried the first few meetings that we wouldn't have enough chairs for people, but we only had 3 people the first meeting. The meeting was set up in the living room. Somewhere along the line, we started bringing snacks so that we could meet in the kitchen and we could talk in the middle when we had a recess. We could talk with each other in a one-to-one basis about our writing, and we also like to eat. I did not charge a fee. The purpose of the group was for people to be able to share what they were writing, not the whole thing. You had sort of 10 minutes to read, and then we would do a discussion. And if you had some information about marketing, we shared that. And the thing with the critique was the feedback. It was supposed to be good and bad stuff, but we were supposed to do it in a way that was very, not really nice, but very to help us to fix it, not really to be judgmental or anything, and not to be nasty. That was the goal of it. Of course, we grew over the years in how many people came. In fact, one time we had 17 people here. And so we were going into my office, which is right behind the, or right next to rather to the living room. And so we went along that way until September 2014, when I had a boarder with a cat. And there was no room in the inn for a writers group to meet. And if anybody was allergic to cats, well, you can imagine. So we had to find another place. So the first place we went to was a cafe that was opened around the corner. And some of us writers had done some reading presentations there. So we went there. Well, it closed a few months later. Okay, so we went into a secondhand bookstore with a quilting edition. We were in the quilting room, not quilting, at the table there for our meeting. That closed a few months later. So we were getting stuck. Enter Janet Nanos, who was librarian at the S. Walter Stewart then library. And she suggested, we asked us really if we would like to partner with the library and meet in the auditorium. Yes, yes, yes. So we started doing that. It was also great for our presentations as well. So that was the way that happened. And then what happened next was last year with COVID. So the libraries closed, a lot of things closed temporarily. And so no programs at the library. So what did we do? Enter Nick Nanos, yes, Janet's husband, who is also one of our members. And he is an retired IT guy. So he got a Zooming on Zoom. So now we're meeting twice a month, the first or second or third Wednesday of the month and the last Wednesday, depending how many Wednesdays there are in the month. And that's what we've been doing since then. And now we're doing our presentation online. And that gets me to introducing our host. And you really don't think you were going to be stuck with me all the way. I'll be back. But anyway, I'm going to introduce our host. She's a fairly new member from 3 years. Her name is Andrea Labor, but she likes to be called Kit. So please call her Kit. And she is a library technician by day and by night. She swigs down the coffee so she can do her writing and stay awake doing it, obviously. She won 3rd place in the Seneca Salone Writing Contest in 2011 and aspires to be published. And she has been with the East End Writers Group for 3 years when we were at the library. And she likes the diverse feedback from everybody. And now, as I usually say, over to you, Kit.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I'm your host. And remember, for the purposes of our readers, everyone is automatically muted. So please don't unmute yourself. Any questions you have can be placed in the chat. I'm your host, Kit, and I'll be sharing words of writing inspiration periodically throughout our presentation. Tonight, we'll be enjoying readings and book trailers, a songwriting session, an interview between a writer and a character, and finally, a panel discussion on publishing and how you can do it. In addition to the presenters tonight, you can see some of the East End Writers Group's authors and their publications in the featured PowerPoint. The books featured tonight are available at Indigo, Chapters, Amazon, and wherever good books are sold. Shane, could you please roll our PowerPoint? Fabulous MC indeed. Our first presenters tonight are Ellen and Jake, when the first person singular is not yourself. Jake and Ellen are both long-standing East End Writers Group participants. Jake has been sharing selections with the group of a very timely book. Ellen has offered to interview Jake for this celebration. Take it away, Ellen and Jake.
Thanks, Kit. Jake, yes, this is a timely book indeed. Please start by telling us about your main character.
Excuse me. The main character of my book is actually my niece. And my niece, back last March, developed long COVID. She was interviewed on the CBC National News about this. And when I saw that interview, I said to myself, I have to write that story. She's a musician or was a musician by day, a music teacher, but because of long COVID, that has sort of gone by the wayside. So she's kind of lost her living right now, but she's struggling with it, and she's what the story is all about.
Understood, thanks. Why have you chosen to use the first person to write about someone who's not you?
I wanted to get very, very close to what it really, really feels like to be stuck in something so life-transforming and so traumatic, to get really close to it. And I thought the only way to do that is first person, even though it isn't me. But I wanted her to speak. I wanted to be able to speak on her behalf because she couldn't do it.
You made that choice clear. How has your choice helped your writing?
It's helped me to focus on something other than my own intellectual preoccupations most of the time, and to really, really dig into somebody else, what it's really like to understand somebody else's deep-seated difficulties.
Very important consideration. Has your choice hobbled your writing?
I would say it has not hobbled my writing. It has actually helped it quite a bit, because I've been able to give a lot of free expression to somebody else's existence, but I was able to put my own spin on it, I guess, and make it come alive.
fascinating insights you've given us into your writing process. Another issue is the COVID-19 context. For the general public, COVID was at first a killer of the elderly. Long COVID, variants, deaths among young adults then emerged. How will your book correct misconceptions?
I think the misconceptions, particularly early on, and even quite throughout, well, perhaps not necessarily misconceptions, but what got all the press was the long-term care facilities because of so many deaths there. But in fact, it was the younger people that were the larger cohort of people contracting the illness. And in many cases, quite seriously, the long COVID sufferers are a relatively small percentage, but still a very large number, and people who have and continue to suffer a great deal.
That's useful context for sure. Parts of your manuscript you've read for East End writers offer details about how long COVID has affected your niece physically and emotionally. Can you please share some of that?
I spoke to her dad last night, and he said, you know, she still can't read the book. She just can't do it. It's been so terribly traumatic, and she likens it to PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome thing, because it was so completely devastating to not be able to walk for a long time, to not even be able to think straight, and all that kind of stuff. It was just brutal.
So tough. And it's also affected her professionally. Can you explain about that, please?
Well, being a music teacher, she, of course, had to engage with people directly most of the time. Her lessons were generally either at her place or at the client's place. And that, of course, immediately had to stop when COVID hit. And of course, there was the remote possibility, but most people didn't want to go for that. So she lost most of her clients, and also basically lost the ability to deal with them anyway, because it was so difficult to even try to teach. However, she did keep a few, but essentially her livelihood was taken away from her.
That's been very, very hard. That's very clear. You recently read to East End writers a section about an online lesson that went well. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, it was a lesson with a young fellow of 15 years of age who had been her student since he was 4 years old, and they were going through a rather difficult Beethoven piece. And she said to him, jokingly as it were, she says, I want you to play this really well, because this is going to be played at my funeral, and you're the one that's going to play it. And he had a little hard time swallowing that one, but when she said, okay, I'm sorry I said that, but take it away, and then he played it like it was just a piece of magic. And it was beautiful. And it almost made her cry.
Yes, and I can almost hear the music. I'm sure the rest of us can as well. When you started writing this book, your niece had been very ill for a while, and recently she started feeling better. Does she know how typical her path is?
I think she's fairly cognizant of the typicalness of it. Yeah, mind you, it's different for everybody, but she has her good days and her bad days, and it is a difficult path, and there's a lot of people on it.
You've shared so many details. In sum, why are you sharing her story?
Because, as she said, I survived. And I thought that was a very powerful statement. And I just had to share it. I just had to. That's what I needed to do.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jake. I'm looking forward to hearing more sections at East End Writers as you write. And I'm also looking forward to reading the book when it's published. I trust it will get the wide circulation it will deserve. So best wishes to you and your niece.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jake and Ellen. Our first writing tip, and I think it's pretty timely with this interview, is it's not about you, it's about giving the reader something of value. And that's from Nelwyn Lampert. Our next reader is Tom Laver. Tom is a retired high school teacher and a former educational curriculum writer for TVO. His writing has also appeared in several Canadian and US publications. Tonight, he's reading an article titled, "Is That All You Can Do? Teach?" Now for Tom Laver.
Thanks, Kit. One September morning in 1968, I was hitchhiking to my first teaching practice assignment at Laura Secord Secondary School near St. Catharines, Ontario. There was no public transit, and I had no car. Despite wearing the 1960 teacher's uniform, a suit and tie, a procession of vehicles passed me by. Suddenly, a yellow Chevrolet Camaro pulled up alongside and the driver rolled down the window. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Laura Secord School," I answered. "So am I," he replied. "Hop in." As we drove into the parking lot, I said, "Thanks. I'll see you in the staff room." "No, you won't. I'm in grade 12. If you had asked me then why I had decided to become a teacher, my answer would have been something like, "I don't know. I wish maybe I hadn't. That kid is a Camaro. I have a thumb." I had no particular interest in becoming a teacher. At 26, I just wanted to have an occupation that provided more personal fulfillment than my current job. After resigning from that business, I took some career tests. The results suggested I should teach. So that's why I found myself in 1968 hitchhiking to my first teaching practice assignment. When my training ended in the spring of 1969, I accepted a position at a Toronto high school. Evaluations were the most daunting part of teaching in those early days. My first appraisal came from the head of the English department. I was teaching a class of grade 10 students who didn't like Shakespeare much. The evaluator entered the room wearing a black suit and a dark tie. His black mustache was so thin, it appeared as if it had been drawn with a fine point artist pencil. I had the feeling that he might be there as my educational undertaker, rather than as a supportive older colleague. He seated himself in the second to last desk from the back of the classroom, in front of one of my young charges. To complete his evaluator's package, he reached into his black briefcase and withdrew a black notebook and a pen. As he scribbled notations in his little black book, it felt as if I was participating in the Last Judgment, mine. So intent was he in formulating his commandments for improvement that he failed to notice the student behind him peering over his shoulder to see what he wrote. "We'll meet later to talk about the lesson," he said. But I didn't need to wait. The student who had been literally overseeing my review approached me. "Do you want to know how you did?" he asked with a slight grin. It turned out he was a better reader of little black books than of Shakespeare. Discipline problems are another hurdle facing a new teacher. In my first year, a student wouldn't stop talking. His behavior was upsetting, but I was also somewhat afraid of him. He was much taller than me. After weeks of putting up with this, I nervously ordered him to see the principal. He very reluctantly stood up to leave. "Why don't you call your mother?" he snarled. I felt like doing just that. I knew that my mother would have dealt with him much more effectively. The principal apparently persuaded him how invaluable my lessons were and how they would change his life forever. However, while he caused me no more difficulty, I came away from this experience realizing that he looked cool and in control. I did not. 2 years later, I learned to deal more effectively with a different kind of behavior issue. The students in this class frequently whispered to each other, "What are you doing?" It was only slightly annoying, but it had the effect which it intended, distraction. Nevertheless, I didn't rise to the bait. One day, a way to deal with the problem came along quite by chance. The ringleader was returning from the washroom. As he entered the classroom, he slipped and fell on the floor. While he sprawled there, surprised but unhurt, I inquired politely, while attempting to imitate the tone used by the offending members of the group, "What are you doing?" "Good one, sir," his classmates shouted out as they laughed hysterically. The problem was resolved. I had not let the matter fester as I had with the student in my first example, and I had found a way to handle it without alienating the class. They, including the ringleader, were now on my side. And this time I had suffered no loss of face. While all discipline problems would not be so easily dealt with, and a measure of luck had helped me to put an end to this one, my response to the "What are you doing?" caper may have been the moment when I ceased to be a new teacher, at least in terms of my classroom management skills. You will recall at the beginning of this piece, I wondered if my decision to become a teacher might have been the wrong one. 48 years later, do I have any doubts about my career choice? In 1980, I was spending part of a sabbatical year in London, England. I went into an employment agency to see if I could supplement my income. The agent checked my resume. "Is that all you can do? Teach?" he said. "Don't you have any skills?" I was taken aback and quickly left his office. Today, I would say this to him: if by teach you mean spending my life in a tremendously fulfilling occupation, enjoying the company of enthusiastic young people who are devoid of cynicism and full of fun, who have taught me as I age to be optimistic about life, then I would say, yes, that's my only skill. That's all I can do. Now at 74, I have decided to stop teaching. My career has been filled with wonderful experiences. The decision to end it is etched with great sadness.
Thank you, Tom. Wow. Our next piece of writing wisdom is from John Irving. "Half my life is an active revision. Can relate." And our next reader is Tom Taylor, our other Tom. Tom is a Canadian author with 4 published novels concerning the adventures of Canada's first secret agent in the War of 1812, Brock's Agent, Brock's Railroad, Brock's Traitor, and Brock's Assassin. So Shane, can you roll the tape on Tom's video? Thank you. And now to Tom Taylor.
So Brock's Agent is the story about Upper Canada's first secret agent in the War of 1812. There are 4 books in the series so far. The 5th one I'm writing is called Brock's Spirit. The tagline underneath is Stony Creek, Laura Secord, and the Battle at Beaver Dams. So, however, I decided I'd read the first few pages at the beginning of the series from Brock's Agent, and it opens this way. Upper Canada, March 1811. Jonathan Westlake stood on the snow-covered path and wondered. It shouldn't have come to this. He stared back at his school door. On the other side of it, his schoolmates continued their lesson minus the troublemaker. That's what the Reverend Strawn had called him before ushering him out by the collar. It didn't matter that Westlake was in the right. 3-time offenders got expelled, no exceptions. Just one punch to blacken the eye of the class bully, and Westlake was going home, leaving the town of Cornwall and his friends forever, never to graduate, at least not from this school. And so close to the finish line, he thought. As he inhaled the sharp morning air to calm himself, he smelled smoke from the schoolhouse fire, which reminded him of home, of his father, and the hell to come after this kind of news. And he'd have to watch the disappointment and sadness in his mother's face. She held such faith in him. This is going to be awful, he said out loud to no one. He'd have to think of the right words to explain to her what had happened and why. The sky had clouded over gray and a light snow began to fall. Westlake rubbed his palms over both ears and tugged down on the rim of the knitted hat that covered his blonde hair. He stamped his feet to keep them warm, then in anger kicked hard at the snow on the partly shoveled path. Some broken rocks appeared. He glanced back at the school door again, 25 paces away, and picked up a handful of stones. An inner voice told him not to do it. He hesitated, yet still leaned back to throw. But instead of the door, he aimed for a tree beside the schoolhouse. The stone struck its target. He clenched his other fist in victory, dead center. He laughed as an idea came to him, something to make amends for the bad news. The family fur trading business needed a special type of help from someone able to write. A proposition to his father now formed in his mind, one that offered independence and perhaps adventure. He could work out the details on his long ride home to York. The next rock, bigger than the first, smacked the same spot, but ricocheted aside to hammer the school's external wall. Seconds later, the door burst open. In his black garb, the Reverend Strong stood there with legs planted well apart, gripping a cane ready for battle. That chiseled face, large and round with sunken cheeks, was set hard to project his authority. The gusting wind rippled the hem of his gown. God doesn't suffer troublemakers, laddie, the clergyman announced in his harsh Scottish accent. Heaving rocks at my school will only make matters worse for you in the eyes of the Lord. I was just aiming at the tree, sir, Westlake pointed. If I wanted to hit that door, it would be too easy. He tossed the stone in the air, caught it again, and grinned. Strong glanced back at the door where he stood and frowned. A few students had gathered just inside, and Westlake's friend, Danny Lapointe, waved to him from behind the teacher's back. Strong shut the door. Was that a threat, young man? Twice he slapped the cane against his palm, and one black boot began tapping. You're finished here, so go home. Trouble follows some characters around all their lives, and you're one of those characters. Strawn had said that much and worse on other occasions to different students. Anyone deemed the least little bit out of order, his order, was labeled God's enemy or Satan's imp. What such intimidation had to do with teaching, Westlake couldn't understand. In the contemptuous curve of Strawn's lip, there was a nastiness that reminded Westlake of another reason he had come to hate this school. The Reverend Strawn was a prick. Westlake reared back to throw his missile and yelled, "Your problem is you have no sense of humor." The snow blew harder and he felt some flakes melting on his cheek. "Don't you dare!" Strawn shook the cane in the air, but he didn't budge from the doorway, as if the fate of the world depended on how rigid he stood. Westlake tested the smooth stone between his fingers, his arm poised behind his head. They couldn't do any worse than expel him, and Strawn was right. There was no reason to linger here. Besides, he had that proposal to offer his father. He would never enter the Cornwall school again. And in this moment, he realized that was fine with him. Westlake let the stone fly. It bounced off the tree and shot between Strawn's boots. "Just like I told you," he shouted, "dead center." Then, laughing quietly to himself, Jonathan Westlake took one last look through the falling snow at the black figure of the Reverend Strawn in his schoolhouse. He gave a broad smile, saluted goodbye, and turned his back. He was free.
Thank you, Tom. You can't wait for inspiration. You have to go after it with a club. Jack London. And our third writing tip of the night. Our next presenter is Nick Nanos. He is a songwriter and classical singer with a long musical career that includes performances in almost every region of North America, as well as Europe and the Middle East. Tonight, he will be speaking and singing and playing about the rhythms of words and how they influence writing songs, operas, masques, etc. Take it away, Nick.
Thank you, Kit. Thank you so much. I'm going to share the screen. That's not what I wanted to share. All right, let's try this again. That is what I want to share. Here we are. Now, I've written poetry, and I've written stories, and I've written lots and lots of songs. And there's an immense difference between songs, stories, and the way they're written, and poetry. Now with poems, and I'm going to read this one here called Clouds, the very first verse of it anyway. Look and listen, you can see clouds in the sky dancing free, pushed along by Zephyr's sign, painting fantasies on high. The force and meaning of a poem come partly from the sound, partly from the fact that you use different meanings to ordinary words than is usually used. And sometimes how the poem is laid out on the page means a lot too. I wrote one poem that's in the shape of a figure eight. And depending on which direction you read it, going left to right in the shape of a backwards S, or the other way in the shape of an S, or from side to side all the way down or all the way up, the meaning changes slightly because the words come in different orders. The shape of the poem is also fascinating because it's an 8 and the middle of the word, the middle word right in the center is I-O-N, ion. But every other word ends in I-O-N, nation, etc. So the I-O-N really doesn't have that sort of meaning that you expect it to have. That's what poetry is. Stories, of course, we're all familiar with. Stories are stories. And the plot is needed in order to drive the story forward. And then you have clashes with people and tensions and so on. But when you write a song, it's different because the rhythm of the words dictates how the tune is going to work. So I have a song that I wrote called Wisdom of the Silence. Listen to the wisdom of the silence. Look deep for the beauty that's inside. Dare to still your thoughts and calm their cadence. Let all nature take you for a ride. The problem with that is, when you get into the verse, the whole cadence and rhythm of the words changes. So that rhythm doesn't work for the song. And to really show how complicated this can get, there is a fairly famous old carol called Adim Lea Bounden. It was set by two very well-known composers. If you're into Anglican church music, they're well-known anyway, although Benjamin Britten's probably better known than Boris Ord. Boris Ord treated Adim Lea Bounden like this. Adim Lea Bounden, bounden in a bond, 4,000 winter, thought he not too long. Whereas Benjamin Britten had a different take. Adim Lea Bounden, bounden in a bond, 4,000 winter, thought he not too long. Same words, completely different take. The rhythm doesn't change the meaning so much as the weights of what a bond, in Old English it's a jail. Bounden means they're chained up in the jail. It changes the weight of how it works. There's a gentleness to the Ord that makes sense because it's all for an apple that he took, as Clark is finding written in their book. Although they scribbled more the way Britten put it. But when you get into Wisdom of the Silence, you also have to deal with the rhythm of the words. So it comes out this way. Listen to the wisdom of the silence. Look deep for the beauty that's inside. Gently still your thoughts and calm their cadence. Let all nature take you for a ride. And so on. The thing here is, the reason I chose that rhythm is because of the consistency throughout. Listen to the wisdom of the silence. Look deep for the beauty that's inside. Dare to still your thoughts and calm their cadence. Let all nature take you for a ride. And that's consistency goes into the verse. So the thing holds together much better as a whole. I could have treated the verse and the chorus and the bridge differently. The bridge is treated differently. It's a completely different rhythm. But bridges are like that because they take it in a completely different direction and then you come back again. So the real problem with writing a song is to discover the correct rhythm that the tune demands. And that is that. Ta-da. Thank you for listening.
And thank you, Nick. Our next writing tip is, I write for the same reason I breathe, because if I didn't, I would die. Isaac Asimov. And our next presenter is Brian Moore. He lives in Toronto, where he worked as a project manager, and he has previously published in Blank Spaces, Agnes and True, and the Valparaiso Review. He is reading a story titled Summer Heading North published in Blank Spaces. Now for Brian.
Thanks, Kit. Summer heading north. No matter how far he goes, the women are always waiting. He shuffles in silence up the county line, where he has dragged on alone winters and summers, pressing against the fist of an evening wind or sagging and tingling under the cool spirit of spring rain. Over the years, he has learned this: travel is necessary. Motion is peace. Memory sleeps on the hot asphalt vein of number 10. The heat revives him in a way that he does not understand, giving each day shape and depth and boundaries. When the weather bakes for a few short weeks in July and August, the nights between towns are at cathedral skies over the farms, like someone has taken the lid off the world. He can straddle the center line of the highway at 4 o'clock in the morning, no cars in sight in the crisp pre-dawn, and throw his arms and head up to the stars. The car slows down and crunches onto the gravel shoulder ahead of him in a halo of dust. He keeps walking and the window whirs down beside him. A young woman with a pleasant black face leans over and calls to him in a voice like cold water. "Would you like a ride?" "Oh, no, I don't think so." "You're a long way from anywhere," she says. "Hop in." When he was young, every toy was shiny and electric with promise. He could name the model of all the automobiles on the road, the low-finned cars that were like a hungry dog sprung from its leash, or the big land ships, plush and chromed with white leather seats, interiors hushed as Saturday morning. Now the quicksilver seals and tags on the hoods are another language. "I like to drive with the windows down," she says. "It's so hot. Is that okay?" The draft buffets and cuts at his eyes until they water. He is vaguely aware that he is homeless, vagrant. People do not like how he smells, so they turn on air conditioning or roll down windows. They always want to give him showers too, which are unpleasant, tearing at his skin the way you scrape off a scab. People are like that, always wanting something. "How long have you been walking?" "My name is Henry." "I'm pleased to meet you, Henry. My name is Mariah. How far did you come this morning?" "Oh, hard to say. This is a nice day for walking." She has long, clean hands and painted nails. Her hair is made up in a wave and tinted auburn. She looks the way he thinks women are supposed to look, without effort. The cropland and swamps, fences and hills glide by, scrubbed of their texture, sanded down by the smooth ride of the sedan. Intersections interrupt with white letters on green signs: Flesherton, Rocky Saugeen, Arnott. As the sun lowers into the windshield, the road comes to an end, dipping into a town with a carpeting of maple, ash, and lindens, and big stone churches and a great sparkling bay of water that shimmers with a late afternoon glare as far north as he can see. SUVs cluster around traffic lights and trucks growl down the hills, grinding brakes. He has been here before. Drawn back to a beginning, he is tense and fascinated, like passing a wreck in the ditch. The woman is a very good, very safe driver. They turn down a street lined with empty storefronts, coffee shops, and men from the rehab shelter who stand smoking at the corners, sentinels for tourists, with their empty palms outstretched. They cross a bridge, gushing with planter boxes of geraniums and ivy, and pull into the driveway of an old brick house with a wood veranda of flaking blue paint. The Blue House. "We're home. Let's get you inside." She takes a key from her jeans and opens the front door. She slides the overcoat off his shoulders. She peels away a vest, a sweater, and 3 shirts limp and dark with sweat. She stops at his undershirt. "How are you feeling, Henry?" He feels confused and embarrassed. He should know what is happening. "Are you my wife?" The lady smiles. She puts her hand over her mouth as if to stifle a laugh. Instead, she is crying and reaches her long, bare arms around him and squeezes him lightly, afraid of fragility in a man who is strong and old and worn. "She's gone, Henry. Gone many years ago." in the crash. That's right, with your lovely, lovely girls. I'm so sorry. This is your house, Henry. Your brother and my aunt and all your nieces will take care of you as long as we can. I just wish you would stop leaving. I'm always scared we're not going to find you. I don't want a home. She wipes her nose with one slender manicured hand. She takes on an expression of pragmatism. Then we will have to be the next best thing. She says this with an air of, now we are all business, but her eyes are soft. He looks around the living room with his wife's piano in the corner, his daughter's books ordered like soldiers in the tall oak shelves he had made himself, and all the beautiful things he had meant for the girls to have when they grew up, just where he had left them. I suppose I should wash up. He climbs the stairs, searching for where the bathroom used to be.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Our next writing tip is from Gail Murray, one of our East End writers. Incorporate all 5 senses in the narrative. What does the character see? What do they smell? What do they touch? And now we get to Sharon, who needs no introduction. Take it away, Sharon. And don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thanks. I'm going to be dealing with what happens when fact and fiction collide. And I found that out kind of the hard way. You see, I couldn't seem to get rid of the nun who bullied me in grade 2 and grade 8 at Holy Cross School. I put her in my memoir, The Enemy Within Us. Of course, I changed her name, like I did everybody else except myself, my parents, and my grandpa. And also, that wasn't all I did, though. She seemed to show up in Beyond Faith, the novel that I wrote, the 3rd one in the Beyond Mystery series. And if you think that's bad enough, I called her Sister Olsen, at least the name is different, but if that's not bad enough, the main character in there, private investigator Dana Bowman, she had an experience with a nun, and it seems to mimic mine, or is it the other way around? What I'm going to do is take a gander into some of these words, some short excerpts from both. The first one is from the memoir, and it's the nun, and you'll get her name in a minute, and she's teaching our class in grade 2. Turn to page 12, exercise A. Mother St. Helen stands behind her desk. She holds the exercise book, alternating between glancing down at it and over at us. When you are finished it and exercise B, quietly bring up for me to look at. She sits down. For the next 15 to 20 minutes, the only sounds are the flipping of pages and the scratching of pencils. I read through each question and write down my answer or draw the picture required. Some of the students finish quickly and line up at Mother's desk, so now I hear her occasional, "That's wrong. How do you expect to pass grade 2? Or, "Good." I have now completed the work. So I pick up the exercise book, which is the size of a thick coloring book, walk to the front and line up. Nora and Mickey stand in front of me. Mother looks at Nora's work and says, "Good. I think I have also done all right." "How do you expect to pass grade 2? Mother asked Mickey. "I hope I have done all right." It is now my turn. I say nothing while placing the open exercise book before Mother. She presses her lips together as she follows along on the page with her pencil. When she reaches the bottom, she jerks the book at me. "What's this?" she asks. I look down and read out loud, "Draw an X." "The word isn't X, it's an axe." I have drawn an X. "Stupid," she says. "You should know better than that." She whacks the pencil against my nose. Tears well up in my eyes. My face must be turning red because Mother looks strangely at me. "I'm sorry, did I hurt you? Come down to the lunchroom after school and I'll make it up to you." I can't speak because I am too busy pretending tears are not sliding down my face. And so that's from the memoir. Now with Beyond Faith, oh dear. My PI, Dana Bowman, she's right here. You can't see her. She's sitting over on the couch and looks like she's trying to direct me or something. "What do you want now?" I have to read the same thing from there. So Just sit there and be quiet. I'll sit down. All right. Oh, you want a little introduction? Fine. The nun is Sister Olson in there. She's suspected of killing her brother by pushing him into traffic. Detective Sergeant Fielding, who's in charge of the investigation, wants the twins, that's P.I. Dana Bowman and her twin brother, Bast Overture, who run the detective agency, to talk to her and see if they can get something out of her one way or the other, but doesn't tell them who the client is. And here we go. When Fielding, followed by the potential client, entered the office, Buddy lunged forward, circled the ladder, and snarled. Fielding yanked him away by his collar. The red-headed woman stared at me. You, she said. Yes, me. And who are you? Then it clicked. I heard Fielding's introductions through a fog that swirled back 33 years. You were supposed to draw an X, not an X. The nun shakes her fingers at me. I cringe, then blurt out, there is an X in the X, see? I point to the X in the word axe. You stupid little girl, she shouts at me. She starts shaking me harder, and I am crying. Stop, you stupid nun, you're hurting me. She keeps shaking me and yelling, stupid little girl, over and over again, and I am swirling into a black hole. Are you all right, sis? You look like you've seen a ghost, my brother says. Bast I have. Don't you recognize her? I pointed to the woman. Mother St. Elizabeth Joan. You taught us grade 2 at St. Andrews in Toronto until they kicked you out. I was Dana Overture then. The woman stepped back and put her hands to her face. Oh my God, I can't, I must go. She swiveled around, nearly tripping over Buddy, then hurried towards the door. Fielding blocked her way. Now, just a minute, let's sort this out, he said. Sister Olson, please sit down. He pointed to the couch. She shuffled over, sat down, and settled into cringe mode. Buddy shut up, but continued to stare at her, ready to growl if she moved. I remained standing, my mouth agape. Bast stroked his mustache. You can sit down too, Dana Fielding said. I sat. Buddy whined, settled at my feet, growled once at the nun, and turned quiet again. So you can see Dana's experience with Sister Olson is very similar to mine. But in the novel, she doesn't reappear in grade 8, but she also shows up obviously with Dana as a grown-up. And she really turns nasty in there. At one point, she's going after Bass with an axe, but I'm not gonna tell you that. You gotta read the book to find out. In the memoir, the nun does leave Holy Cross School after 4 months in grade 2, but she returns when I'm in grade 8, and this time she's the principal. And oh yeah, I'm her slave. She makes me her slave. I have to run errands for her. I have to collect all the attendance sheets. And then there's the business with the mimeograph machine. Some of you, like Tom, who was a teacher, will probably remember what I'm talking about. The mimeograph machine with the purple ink. She didn't explain very well what to do with it. So I couldn't make the copies properly. I had ink on my fingers. I had ink on my clothes. I had to go, of course, tell the nun this. Have to tell the truth, you know, and of course I got you know what for. And what are you doing, Dana? What's so funny? I bet you that never happened to you. Now just shut up and sit there. Okay. Like I said, Dana only had the nun and his teacher in grade 2, so she kind of got off easy. Dana, okay, here's something more against the argument. Dana turns 40 and beyond faith, which takes place in November and December 1999, and also on New Year's Eve, which taking us into the 2000, January the 1st. So that puts Dana in grade 2 in the 1960s, which is a decade after I was in grade 2. Dana and her brother did grow up in Toronto, but out in the West End, in Etobicoke, and they went to a different school, and I made up the name of the school. Dana and I never crossed paths until I started writing the Beyond Mystery series. Now, mind you, I was writing the memoir off and on during that time, and Dana was, of course, in my head. So was the memoir. Did Dana grab a piece of the memoir and do something with the nun? I don't know. Or was I really out to get this nun? I don't know about that. The mimeograph business, I gathered Dana never, from her ridiculous outbursts, that she never had that problem. But you know, the real nun, I found out later on, much later on, that she left the convent. Now that was no big surprise to me. And she got married and she had kids and she died. So what do I have to worry about from her? I mean, is her spirit gonna come after me? Oh, come on. What's that? Somebody at the door. Dana's asleep now. I'll talk to her. I thought I locked that door. Somebody's coming in. Oh no, oh, she's coming in. I gotta get out of here.